looking back at the book and kind of jumping back into where we left off. Shoot, where's the view model data? There we go. I think that's where we're looking at. So if you're looking at the book, we're around page 181 is where we're going to be putting the code in. If you're following along. So let me bring this up. So remember last thing we did yesterday, we created this paging info class, which is going to keep track of the information about which page we are on, how many pages there are total. So that's what that's for. The next thing we want to do is start to actually create this paging helpers, this extension method. Okay. So I'm going to make this class a static class, because remember, to add an extension method, the class has to be static. The signature of this method is going to look like so. So it returns an MVC HTML string. You'll see that I need to bring in the using for that. That's going to be on the system web MVC package namespace. So we need to bring that in. Okay. So public static returns an HTML string. Name of the method is page links. The first parameter it takes is going to be this HTML helper object, which is what we're adding the method to. We're adding it to the HTML helper object. Paging info is just what we have up here. That's that same class. And then what I need as well is a function to say, okay, for this page, give me the URL for that page. Given this page number, give me the URL for that page. So the way I'm going to find that, I'm going to add another type in here called page URL function. Okay, so it's a delegate type. Remember, you're going to need to add the using for that one.
Oh, using web?
Yes, system add MVC. So that third one, we need to add in what I have there in the middle, the delegate type page URL function.
So what does that line right there do that you highlighted?
So this one right here, I'm declaring a type, right? The name of that type is page URL function, okay? So that's a delegate that takes in an integer, which is the page number, and it's going to return a string, which is the URL for that page. It's one part that we need to make this work. Because to make this general, we don't know how to generate those URLs directly if we're going to be able to use this anymore. Does that make sense? So this is just a function that takes in the page number and gives us a URL to that page. Okay? We'll define that function elsewhere. That function we will not define here. Okay? So what we want to create is the Bootstrap pagination system, right? We want to create it with the Bootstrap tags. Okay. If I go out to the web, I'm going to go to the getbootstrap.com page. I'm going to go to documentation, and then I'm going to search for pagination. It's going to give me this page. Okay. So Bootstrap's already got something built in to kind of style these page buttons. Okay. You can kind of see a preview. You've got the different page buttons, and it's got highlighted the current page. You see that? So what we need to generate is all of this code here. Okay. Actually, I think, yeah, we do need all of that. Yeah, so we need to generate that code. Okay? That's our goal, right? So where's a good place to start to say that's the code we want to generate? What might we want to generate first? What might we want to do first with this?
Generate the nav tag.
Probably start with the nav tag. And what might be the next immediately after that? Well, we can generate the UL. So we know it's going to start with a nav and a UL tag, and we know it's going to end with those closing tags. So let's start with those first, because those are the easiest ones to work out. Okay? So in the function, the first thing I want to do is create a string builder, which is where I'm going to build the result that I'm going to return. Okay, this is where I'm going to build up that HTML that eventually I'm going to return. Okay, you may see a red underline because we need to include string builder. So we need to say using system text. So using system text, that we need to add that so we can get to string builder. Okay. Another thing I need to do to make this work, last line of this function, is going to be return HTML string.create and say result2 string. Okay. So this takes the string that we created and turns it into this HTML MVC, this MVC HTML string, which is going to take all those tags and turn them back into something that it kind of can spit out in the view. If we don't use this MVC HTML string, we just keep it as a string, all the tags would get turned into entity symbols. So like the less than symbols would get turned into ampersand LT semicolon. So the reason that we're doing this on the outside is so that the HTML that we actually generate just gets passed on to the browser, because otherwise it'll be re-encoded. And you'd see code in the browser. Okay? So the first line I'm going to add in here is such, right before that, there. So I need to create the nav tag, I need to create the opening UL, I need to create the closing UL and the closing nav. Okay.
What is the add?
It's a good question. Anybody know the answer to that one?
It's going to be raised. Oh, sorry. Is that going to be razor when it goes in?
No. Razor only applies if I'm in a view.
So I'm not 100% sure how it came to this situation, but like when you're working with like image or like paths, the files, the add like takes away that need to like double backslash.
So it does a few things, and it's mainly for when you have kind of interesting situations where you don't want those backslashes to work. So normally, if I wanted to put in a string, I wanted to put a single backslash, right? I need to put two. Well, why is that?
Because backslash is the start of an escape sequence.
Okay. What's another escape sequence that I could use?
New line.
New line, which would be what? Slash n,
Yeah.
right? So if I have this string, it's not treating the n as an n, it's treating this together as an escape sequence, right? So if I wanted to put a single slash, I'd have to put it like that, okay? So There's another escape sequence in there that's relevant here as well. Notice that I'm putting quotes in there, putting double quotes in there. Normally, if I'm using escape characters, I need to put it like that. Right? I need to escape the quotes with a slash. Okay? So putting the @ sign in front changes how these things are dealt with. So if I put an @ sign out in front, that is, it's going to just treat the slash as a slash. So this would actually print out as slash n instead of new line. That would print out as 2 slashes. Again, slashes are just dealt the normal way. So that's common to use whenever you have a lot of slashes, such as if you ever have a path, it's better to put an @ sign out there, avoid double slashes. If you're using a regular expression, same story. And this is a kind of an interesting case where whether or not it's more useful is debatable. So the reason that the big thing that it's doing here, you notice that the 2 double equals here, that they're yellow, right? So without the @ sign there, that's not valid because it would need to be slash quote.
Could you do single quotes? Would that work the same
You
way?
could, but what if I want to actually send double quotes to the browser? I could use single quotes there, but I might want to have I might have a reason that I need to send double quotes to the browser. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so what that ends up doing here is it really just changes this, that, you know, so I can do that double quote thing instead of a slash quote. That's really the difference in behavior. Okay. Here it has no effect, but I'm just doing it there as consistency, if that makes sense. Up here, down there, same way. Okay. So that's the thing to know. The big thing that the @ sign there is for treating slashes differently, for just treating slashes as slashes. Okay. What's the next thing I need to do? Given that, so if I were to look at what that generates now, I've generated those opening tags and those closing tags, right? I still need to generate all of these items in between, right? I still need to generate all those items in between. Okay. So I probably want to do that in some sort of loop. Does that make sense? I probably want to loop through that. Okay. For now, I'm going to actually leave off these next and the previous buttons. I'm just going to do the links in the middle, right? So I just need these numbered buttons, page 1, 2, 3. Okay. So the way I'm going to set this up, I'm going to create a for loop, like so. Now, pause a moment and let's just look at this before you start typing it out. Remember, in a for loop, there's 3 parts, right? So I've got this first part here. Is there anything interesting happening in the first part?
Yeah. You're declaring 2 variables instead of 1.
I'm declaring 2 variables instead of 1. Okay. Any guesses as to why I'm doing that? Why am I declaring 2 variables? Okay.
So the length of the loop can vary depending on how many pages there are. Because if the page sizes are different, then the number should be different.
No. I'm actually doing it to avoid potential variance, but it's not really why. You heard your hand up, Graham?
I was going to say, like, if you needed to change if you needed to change I,
Mm-hmm.
so you create a separate one, so
Okay, so I is the one I'm counting up, right? This one's the one that's going to count from 1 to 3. N is the number of pages that I have, right? Which you can see I'm setting paging info dot total pages. What is total pages? It's that, right? It's that. It's a calculation. It's not just a number. I'm just not just reading a number. I'm actually performing a calculation, right? So the reason I'm doing it this way is to keep it from doing that calculation multiple times. Okay? If I did it the kind of common way, let's think about it this way. If you were going to iterate through a loop, I might say paging info dot total pages, right? That would work, but because this is an actual method, basically, it's not just, hey, read this value. This would have to calculate the number of pages for every time I go through the loop. Does that make sense? Because every time I go through the loop, I say, is I less than this? Well, I don't remember what that is, so I have to go figure it out again.
So are you declaring it inside the loop to keep the variable in the scope of the loop?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, instead
That's
of like
part of it.
declaring outside, yeah.
Which is a common thing. If you have the upper limit for a loop and you have the iterator, well, those are both things you only want in the scope of the loop. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I don't need it anywhere out. But the reason I'm declaring the other variable, rather than writing it this way, right, is to keep that calculation from happening more than once. That makes sense? So once I put it in the variable, I don't have to run that formula again. Okay. So I compute those, figure out, start at 1. Here's n. I'm doing I is less than or equal to n. Why am I doing less than or equal to n rather than strictly just less than? Because don't we normally do less than?
This case, the loop is starting at 1.
Okay.
So instead of counting at 0.
Well, that's part of it, but that doesn't mean that I need to necessarily change the less than. That is related, but that doesn't inherently mean that I have to change it. Anybody else? What's my goal? How many pages do I have?
3.
I have 3. What's the numbers of those pages? Well, obviously the first one's 1, the second one's 2, and the third one's 3, right? If I did less than, what page numbers would I get?
0
1 and 2.
I get 1 and 2.
So you're starting
Right.
at 1.
I'm starting at 1. If I go I is less than n, it'll go 1, 2, done. I won't get the third page. So that's why. And that normally does happen when I'm counting from 1. Normally when I'm counting from 1, I'll switch that over to a less than or equal because I generally want to count up to that last number. Does that make sense? So that's why this loop looks a little bit different than just looping through an array. Because we're counting from 1, we have a calculation that we want to not perform again, and we want to get to the actual number rather than n minus 1. Okay? So get that typed in if you haven't yet. All right, so we're going to loop through the numbers that way. Now, remember, looking at this, what tags do I need to create for each link? I need to create both an LI and an A tag, okay? I need to create 2 different tags, okay? So one tool that I can use to create those tags is a class called Tag Builder, okay? So I can say, hey, I want to create an A tag, okay? So I'm going to create an A tag. I need to set a few different things on that A tag. I need to set the text that goes inside of it, which is the text that the user is going to see. So that is, the way I set that is I'm going to set the inner HTML property. So I'm going to say a.innerHTML equals I.toString. Take the page number, turn it into string. That's what I want to see for the link. Okay. I also need to add a class, or I need to add the link rather. Let's do the link first. So to add the link, I need to call merge attribute. I give it the name of the attribute that I want to set. href page URL I. So I'm saying the href attribute of the anchor tag to be whatever this function returns. Remember? So this, I'm giving it the page number and then just saying, okay, take the URL that this function returns. That's where the link is going to point. I also need to add the Bootstrap class to that. So I'm going to say add CSS class, and the class we need to add to this one is page-link. Okay. So that's going to create the anchor tag. I also need to create the li tag. I'm going to do that a very similar way. Say new tag builder, create a new li tag. Now I want to set the inner HTML of that li tag, right? But what do I want to set it to? What goes inside of the li tag?
The anchor tag.
The anchor tag, right? So what I want to set the inner HTML of that tag is the output of the other one, right? So what I'm going to say is it's set to a.toString. So it's going to take the anchor tag that we created, turn it into a string, use it as the inner HTML of the li tag. Okay. I also need to add an attribute to that. So I'm going to say add CSS class, and I need to add page-item. Okay. So I've created my anchor tag, I've created the li, but so far if I were to just use this as is, you wouldn't actually see any of these links, right? You wouldn't see any of these links. Anybody can tell me why?
You're not returned it?
So what am I returning? I'm returning this result, right? I've never added either of these two things to the result, right? So I need to put those in the result. The way I'm going to do that, I'm going to say result dot append. I'm going to append li.toString. I don't need to append the anchor tag because I've already put that one inside of the li tag. So by adding the li to the output, I've got both of those things. I just need to put the outer thing there. Okay. So that should be enough to get the basics started. There is one thing we want to go back to. I'll come back to here in a bit because we want to highlight the one that's the page you're currently on, which this won't do right now. But let's go ahead and just kind of hook it up and see how this works right now. So I'm going to jump over to the product list view. And I want to use this HTML helper that we just created. Make sure I got this right. Like so. Now, I am going to have a little bit of a problem because I still need to do, I forgot I still need to do another step. So here, the way I'm going to call that, I'm adding it to that HTML helper class. I've called the method page links. The first thing it needs, well, is some sort of paging info object. That's something we need to go back and set up because I haven't set that up yet. There's no way that that's actually being sent to the view right now. So I do need to come back and fix this problem because I don't have a way to pass the paging info object. I need to go do some finagling there. But let's look at what's happening here. So remember we defined that delegate type, right? Here I'm using a lambda and implement it. So I'm saying take the current page number, use URL action, use this method to figure out the URL for that page, okay? So URL action, the first thing it takes is the name of the action that it's going to go to. And the second parameter that I'm passing is what's called the route values, okay? So you remember when we create links, you have the action name, you have the controller name, and then route values is anything else that you need to add as part of that link. Make sense? So we want this to go to a particular page, so I need to add that information here. If I don't add that information there, then it would all go to page 1. That make sense? So that's how I'm going to define this delegate type.
I'm getting an error on the page at the very end.
Where do you mean at the very end?
In the new page. Yeah.
Do you not have a curly brace here?
No, I do.
Do you not have 2 parentheses?
I do. It says the name page does not exist in the current context.
To the left of the arrow, you should have where the word page.
Whoa. Oh, yeah.
Not X. So page, arrow, yada yada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Auto-edited.
I'm going to go back to the controller because there's a few things we need to do in the controller. Okay. So we've already set it up. We already set up pages here. The thing I'm missing is I need some way to pass some additional information to the view. Okay? So what are my options for doing that? What are my options for passing that additional information onto the view? Viewback was one option. Graham?
I was gonna say viewback, but passing it through like the return view.
Okay. How would I pass it through there?
I was thinking you would create an extension method for IEnumerable.
Nope, because I need to add additional data. Remember, extension methods only add behavior. They don't add data. Okay? Evan, you got a hand up?
No, I was just scratching my head.
Okay. So I need to pass additional data. Yes, one way I could do that is viewback. One way I could do this is viewback. But knowing that we're going to build onto this page, I know that I'm going to keep needing to add more things to this, which is normal for a search page. Normal for a search page is you're going to find, oh, I need more things. So it's good to keep this strictly typed, right? Remember, viewbag is loosely typed. So what I actually want to do is change up the model that I'm passing. Okay? I'm going to actually change up the model that I'm passing to the view. So I'm going to go to the models folder, and I'm going to create a new class. I'm going to call it product list view model. I misspelled a few things. Product list view model.
Wait, did you put that in the models folder?
Yes, this is in the models folder. So that model is going to have the two things that I need right now. The first thing is that list of products that I'm going to show for that page. And the next thing is going to be this paging info object that I need to make my page links work. So we're going to add a little bit more to this when we get to Chapter 8 because there's some additional things that we want to add in here. But that's where we're going to start. Okay. Now I need to right now what I'm passing is a list of products. That's what I'm passing to you. I need to change this code up so that I'm now passing that model. Okay. The way I'm going to do that, I'm going to say, okay, well, we've got the list of products. I'm going to add some additional logic here to build the model and then pass the model to the view instead of the list of products. So the way I build the model, I just set products to this list we created here. I'm going to create a new paging info object. The current page is the page that's passed in. Items per page is the page size. And this is that. And this should actually be a count. Okay. Or no, that's right. It should be that. It should be parentheses. I forgot why I had to do the parentheses there. So now note the count here, right? This needs to be the number of items that are actually in the database, not the number of items that are in the page. So I have to actually count the number of items in the database, not to count the number of the items in my products list. Number of items in my products list would just be 4. DBSet does not have a .count property, so I can't just use that. And it does have to make a trip to the database to get that count, so that's why I'm using that link count method. So I've made the update here in the controller. What do I need next to make this work?
You need to go to your view.
I need to go to my view.
And I think you gotta import it or you gotta do the app model.
I have to change what type the view is expecting, right? Because this line is now wrong, right? If I left that there, it would be expecting a list of products, which I'm no longer giving it a list of products. I'm giving it this view model. So I need to change this to product list view model. Remove that IEnumerable. It's just a single product list view model. Okay. Now, one thing I may notice, you notice that this still is in red. I would actually not expect that to be in red at this point. But notice what the error message says. It says IEnumerable product does not contain a paging info thing. Well, it still thinks that this is IEnumerable product, right? It still thinks, even though I changed that line, it still thinks it's the old thing. That's a bug with Visual Studio. So what you need to do is close the list view and reopen it, and it'll all be fine. That typically happens anytime you change the model for a view. Okay, so paging info is now happy if you close it and reopen it, but it'll notice that model is unhappy, right? So remember where we moved the list of products, we moved it into a property of that view model now, right? So rather than iterating through model, we need to iterate through model.products. Model.products. Okay. Once you get that up and running, why don't you test it out, see what you get. It should, for the most part, be working now, although your links for what is currently selected won't show up properly. Okay. Let's see if this works. Yes, Eston.
I still get an error on page info, and I also get an error at html.page.
You have to remember we're passing in the model now, not the actual products.
See what this says? This is the SportsStore logo has a model number stuff.
That makes sense. I'm a little off, but I think I get it. So like, instead of passing products, you're passing in the model.
I'm gonna get that this overall.
Yeah, it's
You see this
I
as
still don't understand this part. Like this part.
There's that.
The I equals 1 comment.
Oh, you see, you created this as a separate file. So you have a class and you delegate it. Nowhere. That's the problem.
Oh.
That is.
We are about to
Take away.
So you see what it's saying? The model is.
We have 9 pages or 9.
It's expecting that
Well,
we run a list view.
I have 9 page options.
No.
What the heck?
Is there a for loop?
Yeah, it's gotta be my folder.
There's no passing list of products, you can pass the model. So just change that to the model.
So you should have something like this at this point. So we have the page links down here. We can click on each of the pages. We'll go through that. You can see how these update. So page 1, page 2, page 3, you can see that in the URL. Okay? So the next change I want to make is highlight the one that you're actually on, right? I want to highlight the one that you're actually on. So let's go back to our paging helpers. Okay? Now, the way that we highlight which one you're currently on is we have to add the CSS class active. Okay? I need to add the CSS class active to it if it is the current page. Okay? So the way I'm going to do that, there's more than one way to do this. The way I'm going to do that is to change this line and use a ternary. So I'm going to say if this is the current page, then mark it page item active, otherwise just mark it page item. Problem solved.
I'm down here. I have the wrong thing. 'Cause right, I had it.
It should be HTML page links.
Yeah, okay, that's what I had, but it's gonna show up as a line instead of just three.
Okay, then go back to code for the paging helper.
Okay.
And you're looping through title items, not total number of pages.
That makes sense.
Because there's 9 items in the database.
But only 3 pages. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep, you have a question?
Yeah, like the page is working, but it's not actually when I click away it does.
Nothing happens?
Yeah, like everything else after works. There's just not
So, so if we hover over the links, we should see where they're taking you to. You see they're all taking you to page 1. Why are they all taking you to page 1? It's a good question. Let's look at the paging helper first. And doing that, there.
Oh, I just got the tool one instead of I.
Yeah. Yeah. You're saying call the method with 1 all the time, regardless
Regardless of where it is in the loop.
So it needs to be on.
Ha.
Yeah. That should work. So what is it telling you? You're getting a list, right? The model's getting a list, and it's expecting a view model, right? So go look at your controller. What's the last line of your code here? Turn to the model. Remember, you made changes here. You have to run it. You can't just refresh. So hit run. Because right now it's still running on your old code. Anytime you make changes to controller or that C# code, anything that's not a view, you're going to have to run it from there. Try the links, make sure they work. So we've got page links. We're able to actually give the user a way to do move for those pages. And the upside of the way we've done it, does it know anything about any of the rest of the code in our website? Those pages? Not really. I could pick this up and drop it off into any other project, take this paging helpers class, put it in any other project, and it would work. It's very general purpose. So we can actually reuse this anytime we need page items. Now I'll do it. If we wanted to add the next and the previous buttons, we could add that in here. But what I want to do next, remember that we talked about, I think it was chapter 5 or so, we talked briefly about this idea of a wait and a sync, right? The whole point of it was to make it so that more users can use the website, right? And the main bottleneck for users using the website is waiting on the database to do something, right? So waiting on the database to do something. Well, the way I've written this right here, this is waiting on the database to do something. It's waiting on the database to go get the list of products. It's waiting on the database to go get the count. Okay? So both of those things I want to do asynchronously. Okay? Both of those things I want to do asynchronously. So the first thing I need to do is convert this action method over to be asynchronous. Okay? So I'm going to say public async. I'm going to change the return type to task action result. So that's the first change I'm going to make. You will notice that there's a red underline here. That is because the task class, I need to import that. So I'm going to say show potential fixes using system.threading.tasks. I need that namespace in order to get to the task class. So system threading tasks. Okay. So that's the first step to converting those over. The next thing I want to do in here, the versions of toList and count that support asynchronous sort of behavior, they're not actually part of Link per se. They're not directly part of Link. They're actually extension methods. So in order to use them, I need to have the proper using or I won't get the intelligence. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and add in that using. The thing I need to reference is using system.data.entity. System.data.entity. That has a lot of useful. It's part of Entity Framework, and it has a lot of useful extension methods to work with Link and Entity Framework. So once I've added that in, we'll start seeing the methods that I need. They'll show up in Link, in IntelliSense. Okay. So rather than calling toList, remember toList is what we call not deferred, right? That's one of the methods that's not deferred. Once we get to that, it runs. Those are the methods that we care about running asynchronously. We don't care about order by, skip, or take because those aren't run at the time I call them. And I don't have to wait for them. But I do have to wait for toList to go through and grab all the items. Okay? So instead of calling toList, I'm going to call toList async. Now you'll see everything turn red, right? Because toList async is now asynchronous. And it doesn't return a list of products, it returns a task list of products. So the way to fix that, I need to put the await keyword here. So I'm going to say await all of that. So I'm going to say go turn this in a list asynchronously. I'll wait for you to be done. In the meantime, anybody else can use the server. Okay. I need to also do a very similar thing with the count. So int count is equal to await db.products dot count. count async. I'm going to save that to a variable and add it in here.
So
Graham?
why do you have to change the count like that? Is it because the count is not async?
So count by itself is not asynchronous. It is synchronous. So it'll go, if I just say count, it'll go to the database and ask for that count, but it's in the meantime it's going to wait and block the server, preventing anybody else from doing anything on the web server while it's getting that count from the database. Does that make sense? So the reason we're doing this again, the whole reason we do these awaits and these async logic here is so that things are faster for other users on the system, right? So the other users can use the system while we're waiting for the database to do its thing.
So to clarify, so wait just kind of signifies to the user and the database, I guess, that we're making a request to a database?
No. So await says, put this code on hold until the thing that I'm waiting for happens. It says, put this code on hold until the thing I'm waiting for happens. It might be a call to a database. It might be a call to some other web services. That's not what's important. It's just saying, put it on hold until the thing I want is done. Okay. So that's where we need to call these async versions. So to-list async, count async, because both of those are not deferred.
So is it going to be really important to know which types
Are deferred and which ones are not? Yes. That is absolutely something you want to memorize. That is absolutely something you want to memorize and know off the top of your head, to know, just looking at code, knowing which ones are deferred and which ones are not, because it does have a big impact on performance.
So deferred is async, right?
So the ones that are deferred, right, order by, skip, and take, are deferred. Deferred meaning they happen later. They don't happen immediately when I call the method. They're not blocking, right? Because they happen later. The ones that are not deferred are the ones that we're going to do asynchronously.
Okay.
Not deferred. There's a few knots in there, I'm sorry. But that's what we're trying to do. Okay. So we've converted this thing over to be asynchronous. Let's just go give it a check just to make sure we haven't broken anything. Always a good check. Always a good thing to double check. So page 1, page 2, page 3, they're all good. Okay. So we've converted that to asynchronous calls. The one last thing that I want to do for chapter 7 is to go ahead and add a nav bar and add a footer. We're going to do this very simply. Okay. Now, if I want to add a nav bar and a footer, which file do I need to go to?
Sorry, so if you want to.
If I want to add a nav bar and a footer to the website, which page do I need to change? I need to change the layout, right? So let's go open up the layout. And let me open up the layout I have over here. So I'm going to say nav, add a nav bar in there, and I also want to add in a footer. We're not doing a very complicated nav bar. There's no links to other pages. It's just, here's the brand, and that's it.
Nice having the bootstrap intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of off topic, but what does the role attribute actually do?
So the role attribute is kind of a hint to, it's a hint to screen readers about how to treat that nav section. Whether or not this is right, I'm not entirely sure. I can't remember if I pulled this from the textbook or if I pulled that from Bootstrap. So whether or not that is correct, I don't know. But that's generally what role means. Role is a hint to screen readers. It's used for things like if you have a button or a link or something, you have something on the UI that you want to kind of behave differently than what normally the tag is. That can help give the screen reader a better hint of it, to say this is a this should behave like a button or such. So let's run that real quick, see what that looks like. Okay, I've got a footer. Let me put a dark background on the footer. BG dark.
Text center.
Yeah, probably text center would be a good thing to add. BG dark, text center.
I gotta change the color.
Mm-hmm. So maybe text white. Okay. I may want to style it a little bit. I may want to add a little bit of space here at the top. So I think I'm going to add some margin there. I may want to move this down to the bottom of the view, right? So let's add some I'm going to add a quick margin here. Margin, or actually padding. P2. Let's see if that looks right. There we go. So add a little bit of padding just to bring that down from the top. I may want to move this down to the bottom, right? So there's a few different ways to move that footer down to the bottom of the view, right? So somebody give me one option that I could use.
Fixed bottom to a class.
Fixed bottom. Okay, let's try that. That's not the way I want to go, but let's just see what it does. So if I say fixed bottom, okay, it's there. Watch what happens when I resize. So I bring this back. Of course I closed it. Notice that with fixed bottom, it's going to cover up the text, right? So that is an option to use for footers, and if that's something you're okay with, then okay. But recognize for mobile, that's a lot of screen real estate to give up all the time. So that's usually not what we want to do. Not usually want to show the footer all of the time. Usually only want to show it when you're scrolled to the bottom. Okay? One way to solve that problem is to use a flex container. So we can take the whole thing, the whole body, and put in and make it into a flex container. So I'm going to say on the body tag, I'm going to add class dflex. That's going to make it a flex container. I'm going to make it flex column, so it's vertical. It's a vertical flex container. And the next thing I need, let's go ahead and just see what that looks like right now. You'll notice that nothing has nothing has, oh, I need to remove fixed bottom. I need to remove fixed bottom. Okay, if you have it this way, it's still not quite at the bottom of the page. It's better, it's not overlapping anything, but it's not at the bottom of the page yet. The trick is we need to say, take the main and grow it to contain all the space that's available. So on the main tag, I'm going to add another class, and this is going to be FlexGrow1. By default, FlexGrow is 0. So I need to set it to 1 to say, take up all the available space. Which means it's the center of the page is going to get all the space that's left over. Yes?
You don't have to do flex shrink for.
Nope, don't have to.
Wait, I think you have to create another container between the footer and the main that has flex grow.
I think so. I mean, I can try it. I don't think but that should have done it. No, there's something I'm missing here. FlexGrow run. I want to take up all the available space. Let's go inspect and see what's going on here.
Okay, so the body doesn't take up the entire space of the page.
Okay, main FlexGrow is being set to 1.
Look at the size of the body.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Oh, right, because I've got to set something there too. Okay, so on the body, there's one more trick I have to pull. So style is equal to height, min height. I haven't set the minimum height of the body. Minimum height is 100 VH. Because I need the height of the body to be at least the height of the view. Right. So that's the way I would recommend solving the problem with your footers, is to use a flex container to take care of that. And you can see there's a little bit of finagling you have to do to get that to work, but now it only shows up when I'm scrolled to the bottom of the page, rather than showing up all the time. Add a little bit of margin here, or sorry, a little bit of padding. B2. Yep.
So what does FlexGrow really supposed to do?
So FlexGrow says take up all the available space. If there is more space in the container than is assigned to any particular item in that flex container, then take all of it. Then it says I want it.
Oh no, flex grow can be on main.
Can be what?
It can be put on main
Yes.
and still work.
It's exactly what I did.
Okay.
The thing I was missing was to set the minimum height of the body.
How does increments in the FlexGrow change the way it works? Like you have a FlexGrow 1 right now, like what if you get it at 3?
So 0 means don't grow at all. Okay, 0 means stay just the minimum size that you need to be. 1 says I'm interested. 1 or higher says I'm interested in that space. Okay. Well, what happens is, let's say I have one item in here that's FlexGrow 1 and one item that's FlexGrow 3. Okay. Add those together, that's 4, right? 1 and 3 makes 4. So one of those is going to get 25% of the space that's available. The other is going to get 75%. So that number, it's used to divvy up how that space gets divided. But typically I'm going to set it up like this way, where I just want to say, well, the main gets everything that's left over.
Would the bootstrap class VH-100
Yep.
work the same?
You said VH what?
VH-100?
We can try. VH-100. Let's see what that does. I'd have to look at the, probably min VH. Because it does need to be the minimum, not set it to always be that. Let's just check. If I look at the body, yeah, so that's doing the same thing. Yeah, so min VH-100 would do it, not just VH-100. Because VH-100 just sets the height. But that means that you're going to run into some issues on, it's not going to work on mobile. So it needs to be min.
Now might be a good time for a break.
Now would be a good time for a break. Let's come back at 2, and we'll resume. I think that puts us at the end of, well, we've got one more thing that we need to do in Chapter 7. But come back at 2 o'clock.